Hello everyone, I'm Katrin. So many of you asked for a tutorial about how I made this card, and so I'm doing a video tutorial. And actually, I have no idea what I'm doing here, especially when it comes to all those technique related things, but we'll see. I didn't recreate the card, but I made a tag in the same style, since it's done way quicker than a card. So let's get started. For my tag, I'm going to use the word Christmas from the Tiny Christmas stamp set, the words have a and magical from Tiny Fairy Tale, the hill with the trees from Over the Mountain Borders, the little fox from Snow Globe Scenes, and the star from the How You Been Started On set. I cut my tag to 2.5 and 3¾ inches, and then I created a mask with the star image I want to use. I stamped it on masking paper and cut it out close to the stamped lines. And now I'm going to create the sky. I start with Distress Oxide Salvage Patina, put that over the star, and then bring Chipped Sapphire around the light blue, blending it in. Of course, you can do any color you want to. You can do like a sparkly pink, then put some light pink under the image, or with the star, yellow would have been a great color, but here I used the same colors that I used for my card. I'm adding some black soot and then just go back and forth between the colors until I'm happy with my sky. I also only want the light glow around my star, so I'm bringing the other colors pretty close to the star. Now I'm bringing in some silver metallic watercolor and splatter that over my sky to create some stars, and then put the panel aside to dry. Next, I'm going to color my images. I put them all in front of me, and I'm going to start with coloring the star. I start with B97 and put that down where I want my star to be the darkest. The next color I use is BG78 and I expand the shadows just a bit. I'm keeping a white line between the stamped lines and my coloring that I'm going to fill in with my lightest color later on. I'm using BG43 here to bring everything together a bit more. My next color is BG11, and you don't have to go for a perfect blend here because most of the image will be covered by the dots we're going to add later. My last color for the star is BG10, and I'm putting that down all over the image. Next, I'm going to color the trees. I'm using BG78 here, doing little strokes downwards. I continue with BG75. And then BG72, keeping the bottom areas of my trees white to make it look like they are covered with snow. I'm bringing in BG78 again, just adding a few tiny strokes to the areas that I want to be the darkest. For the tree trunks, I start with E49, continue with E44, and then use E43 as my lightest color. I'm using pretty dark shades of markers here because I'm coloring a night scene, so everything will be darker. For the little fox, I start with E18. Continue with E08. bring in some E97. And use E31 as my lightest color to go over all the areas I colored so far. The E31 has made all my colors lighter, so I'm bringing in the E18 again. E08. And E97, not using the E31 here again. For the tail and the scarf of the fox, I start with T6, continue with T4, and then use T1 as my lightest color. Next we're going to add some shadows to the snow. The easiest to do a shadow in the shape of an image is to stamp it again, cut it out, lay it down face down, and then lightly trace it with a pencil. I'm doing this with the fox, and for the trees I'm just doing it freehand. The star is in the center of my tag, though the shadow of the fox will be right behind it, and the shadows of the trees will be slightly slanted. The trees are just a simple triangle shape, so I'm doing those freehand. Now we're going to add the shadows to the snow. I start with E97. But this is where I realized that my E34 is darker, so I'm going over the areas I did before again. And then come back with my E97. I'm not drawing directly to the lines that I draw with my pencil before, so I can erase them later. I'm bringing in E91 next. And then use C04 just in the areas that I want to be the darkest. My next color for the shadows is B41. And then I'm bringing in C1 just to add a hint of gray to those shadows. Now I can erase the pencil lines I had drawn before. I'm using the same colors that I used for the shadows behind the trees and the fox to shade my hills. And I'm keeping a thin line just at the top of the hill white. And I'm not using the B34 here, just to have the shadow behind the images a bit darker. Now I'm putting my two hills on top of each other, just how I want them to be on my tag later. And then I'm bringing in the lighter shadow colors again, just to transfer the shadows of the hills to the hill on which the fox is sitting. Last I'm bringing in the C00 just to blend out the shadows a bit. You can use a colorless blender as well, but mine was dried out once again, so I have to get a new one. And C00 is a great option as well. I'm using the same blues just to add a hint of a shadow to the snow on the trees. By now my background has dried and I'm peeling off the mask that I used before and then glue the colored star in its place. And now we're adding the magic. I'm using a white 0.6 Arteza gel pen and draw tiny dots all around the inside of my star. I go around the whole star first and then add more dots. I'm adding some larger dots close to the stamped lines and then add dots all around the outside of my star as well. Start with small dots that are close to each other, close to the stamped lines, and the farther away from the star they are, the smaller they get, and also the farther away from each other. I want it to look like some sparkler is falling off of the star, so I'm adding tiny dots that seem to drip from the star, then add more around the star, just until I'm pleased with what it looks like. I'm adding more dots to the inside of the star and then use my white gel pen to cover the black stamped line completely. I'm bringing in a dark gray speaker pen to add a few tiny dots to the areas that I colored the darkest when I colored my star. You can use a black fine liner instead if you want to. I just happen to have those speaker pens that have a hint of a shimmer in the color. And then I'm using a silver gel pen to add a few more dots just close to the image. My background hadn't dried completely, so I'm bringing in a white Sharpie, which lays down more color than the gel pen. And I'm adding more dots, small and big ones, just until I like the star and its sparkle. Now I'm using the Arteza gel pen again to add some highlights on top of my hills and some snow onto the trees. And I'm using a 0.5 gel pen by Sakura to just add some highlights to the fox. Here I'm bringing down some foam tape to the back of my hills. And glue them on top of each other before I glue them onto my tag. As usual, I hadn't cut my hills perfectly in size, so I'm using my scissors to trim them down to the size of my tag. Again, with the white gel pen, I add a few dots of sparkle to the snow areas. I didn't like those harsh lines the tree shadows created in the snow, so I used my lightest snow colors again to just blend those out a bit. Next, I'm bringing in some crystal stickles and add those to the lightest area of my star. Don't add too much, just a bit. I also add some around my star and to the dripping down sparkle areas and the top of my hills and the inner sides of my tree.